Why, the answer to 1984 is 1776. The quest for global domination has been an aspiration of the powerful elitists since the beginning of civilization itself. You can see this throughout history in the likes of Alexander the Great, Attila the Hun, Napoleon, and Hitler. And now through the global elitists backed by corporations and the international bankers and other entities. All of these people acting in collusion with the Trilateral Commission, the Council of Foreign Relations, the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and other entities. These people, having bought our elected officials through under-the-table payments in cash or gifts, have influenced our politics. You can't trace cash. How stupid would you be to believe these draconian laws were put there by both sides of the aisle, but they're not acting in collusion to strip away our rights? The disappearance of our rights has been occurring since the 1800s, when the English bankers and elitists propped up people like the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan to infiltrate our society. You can control any society if you control their money. If you control their money, you control their politics, and hence the people. This is evident through the statutory laws that have been enacted since the 1800s. The original law was based on the common law, which said if there were no victim, either monetarily or physically, then there was no crime, which means 80% of all laws are unconstitutional, and the Constitution itself says all laws not based upon the Constitution are null and void and have no effect. These statutory laws are there to control the masses and to keep competition down in a supposed free market society. Contained in the following videos, you can see some of the crimes committed against the American people. Using the military against civilians violates the Posse Comitatus Act in the Constitution. Those responsible politicians should be tried in the court for murder and treason. Yet that does not happen because 99% of them are traitors to the Constitution itself. It is a crime for them to know of a crime and not pursue prosecution for those crimes. They have one set of rules for themselves and another for the rest of us ordinary citizens.
Hello, I'm Dr. Frederick Whitehurst. I was employed by the FBI for 16 years as an agent, the last 12 of those years at the FBI Crime Laboratory in Washington, D.C. After reviewing the results of a 6-year investigation into the tragedy at Waco, Texas, I am convinced that the American people have never been told the full truth about that matter.
During the siege, some of the women and all of the children were sent to the bunker, located in the center of the compound. The bunker was an old church records vault which had survived a fire several years before. It is here that the remains of some of the women and the young children were found.
Based upon the fact that the majority of the women and children protected themselves by dousing themselves with water and blankets, trying to keep the smoke to a minimum, trying to prolong themselves, their life, in a nearly fireproof container, clearly demonstrates that they weren't embracing the flame, that they were trying to flee the flame.
According to their autopsy reports, some of the children were still alive during the fire, but based upon the condition of their bodies, there was evidence of a deadly explosion.
I read that the FBI on foot entered the building, shot the Davidians, and planted an explosive device on top of the church vault that he called it. We referred to it as the bunker because it's a concrete cinder block. That's another theory that could not have possibly happened in this particular incident, referring to that explosion. The explosion happened well after the building was totally destroyed. It was very unlikely that that explosion was anything other than a propane cylinder.
The fireball was created by a ruptured propane tank on the ground adjacent to the bunker. But a large hole in the roof of the bunker has never had an official acknowledgement or explanation.
What it tells me is that you had a demolition charge went off on the roof.
General Ben Parton, a former military explosive expert, testified that there were 2 explosions. This footage shows the detonation of a high explosive device on the bunker, which appears to ignite gas from a ruptured propane tank. After completion of the FBI and Texas Rangers investigation, the bunker was bulldozed into rubble. 6 years later, in 1999, permission was granted to test the residue from the blast. Strangely, however, that portion of the bunker was not found after a thorough search of the rubble.
That's a child's. I mean, that's just a
that
little
was
bit.
like a 1-year-old.
Yeah, see this? Boom.
Yeah.
You know?
According to the FBI and ATF investigation, the Branch Davidians did possess some low-order explosives like gunpowder. But this would not be capable of penetrating 6 to 8 inches of steel-reinforced concrete like a high-order explosive such as TNT.
The blast hole at the top of the roof, you can plainly see the rebar is bent in.
The damage to the stainless steel refrigerator, which appears to have been under the blast hole, is consistent with a shape charge, and the blast being directed downward into the room in this enclosed concrete room would very likely cause some seam rupture and create a huge overpressure inside the room that would pretty much kill everybody in there. Anybody who was under this device when it was blown would have been horribly mangled, probably dismembered, pretty much like being thrown into a grain thresher.
Having examined still photographs and videotapes of the bunker, it was apparent to me that this was caused by a shape charge. But what bothers me is who would have the audacity to use such a charge.
Rather than risk your own people going in there and trying to shoot it out with them, it's a standard tactic in city fighting, in military operations that built up terrain, to use explosives in this manner to kill people in the targeted room that you're going to attack.
The military's advice to the FBI was that it should focus on the leadership and capture or kill David Koresh.
It was to our benefit that we were able to prevent him from carrying out the second part of his prophecy, and that is that he intended to kill as many members of law enforcement as he could before his members were killed. It was to our benefit, and we're most fortunate that none of our people were injured.
Well, it's very obvious that the effort that was demonstrated there assured that there would be no survivors in the church records vault.
Was the Attorney General pressured by the White House to end the siege? What were the roles of Webster Hubbell and Vince Foster? Who actually made the decision to use CS gas with 22 children inside the Davidian compound? After 2 years, why is there still no clear answer?
The Rangers had difficulties working with the FBI. They had a major responsibility. We had our responsibility, and they seemed not to go hand in hand. And as I recall, I testified before Congress about having a name in the White House I could have called to.
When the bomb went off in Oklahoma, I knew within the first few hours that somebody was lying. Because you know from evidence, from the architecture of the building, the asymmetry in the collapse of the building, the reach of the warhead was absolutely, totally incompatible with 4,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, or ethanol. So my move was initially, within the first day or two, to get in contact with the senator from Oklahoma's office and try to keep that building from coming down. I knew because they were lying, they would try to cover it up, and they would bring the building down and bury it as quickly as they possibly could to get rid of it, dispose of it. And so I went to Senator Nichols' office, and his assistant, who was handling things for Oklahoma, said he would check it out, see what he could do. I was trying to get him to get the Oklahoma National Guard to do an independent investigation. And 2 days later, he said, well, he talked to the people, and there's a lot of difference of opinion in Oklahoma with respect to what happened. And from that comment, I decided he was going to do nothing, so I turned out a technical report and sent it to 75 senators and congressmen who had very good voting records. And essentially it was a black hole. Most of them sent the report to the FBI for their information and action. One senator wrote a letter back and said, I've withdrawn my report, my support for the counterterrorism bill, and we'll see to it that it is cleaned up before it gets through. But the reaction was pretty much like a black hole. As you know, they went ahead and took the building down and physically buried it. It was physically buried. There's the Murrah building.
Prominent among the organizations sponsoring the Miami event were the Council of the Americas, founder and honorary chairman David Rockefeller, the Americas Society, chairman David Rockefeller, the Forum of the Americas, founder David Rockefeller, the Institute for International Economics, financial backer and board member David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, founder and honorary chairman David Rockefeller. Rockefeller's influence also extends to the current administration. He was chairman emeritus of the CFR when Vice President Dick Cheney once served as a director, a relationship that Cheney concealed during his congressional career.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
Marxism and socialism, and there are those, particularly in the media, who would say that we should tone down our rhetoric about socialism. Read the health care legislation, which, by the way, no one in Washington has read. But if you read the health care legislation, it's actually in the health care legislation. There are paragraphs in the health care legislation that talk about the commissioning of officers in time of a national crisis to work directly for the president. It's laying the groundwork for a constabulary force that will control the population in America. You need to understand this is happening in America, and it fits the model that societies have that have been used when societies move to Marxism.
The question is, what are we going to do about all these atrocities? There's an answer to that. 1984, there must be a solution, and I propose the following steps are the solution. Step 1, find out the procedure for running for local and state offices and the formation of fundraising organizations to make it happen. Step 2, make signs and window lettering on cars with the websites for our action. Step 3, create blocks of people who then move to certain states to create a block of power in that state. Step 4, place nationwide billboards in strategic cities. Step 5, I'm forming a website called the Common Sense Party 2012.com. This will spearhead these initiatives, and I ask for all of you to do something similar. Till then, God bless the Republic, and keep your powder dry.